Hey friends, welcome back to the Guitar Max channel, and today's video is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do. I basically just have a great story to tell you guys about a band that I was in a long time ago in a particular show that we did. I was going through some old video footage recently that I found on an old hard drive, right? And this is stuff from about 10 to 12 years ago. I think it was about a dozen years ago. And this is from the time that I was in this thrash band called Deathriders. Now, Deathriders' claim to fame is that the guy who's the lead singer, and really it's his band, is the original singer from Anthrax. Not Joey Belladonna, but it's the guy who was in the band before that. So this was his band, Deathriders. So it was a combination of Anthrax tunes and then new songs that were still kind of in that style. So we had this one particular show that I will never forget, because this show was like a disaster in so many ways. And the, quote-unquote venue that this show was at was actually a music store. And it basically just got completely destroyed during this show. Anyway, I went and I dug out one of my old stage vests so I can properly tell the story, but here's how it all happened. So, like I said, this was an East LA thrash show. And just so you guys know, there's an entire kind of separate like East LA thrash scene. And it's really cool in some ways, and then it's also a little bit, I don't know, I guess unprofessional in some other ways. But you go to like these backyard shows and there will be a band set up in the backyard, and then there'll be like a 10-year-old kid selling beer and cigarettes. And nobody cares about that stuff, and maybe even like some of the local police will come by and like buy a beer from the kid. Anyway, we were doing one of these shows, and this one was, at least a little bit more professional, I guess, because it was going to be in a music store as opposed to like someone's house or something like this. And it was a whole bunch of bands. It was almost like, a mini like LA thrash festival at this music store. I mean, I'm using the word festival extremely loosely. I think it costs like $4 to get in or something like that. So it's a bunch of bands, one after the other, and a bunch of bands had already played before us. This was sort of like an afternoon type event. And what the store had done, because they were going to have this thrash show inside the store with a lot of people moshing and so forth, what the store had done is they had taken all of the equipment and all of the products and everything that was in the middle of the store, and they had moved it all behind these counters, like these big glass counters that they had on the sides of the store. So all the guitars and, like racks of things, they'd moved all that stuff behind the counters so people couldn't run into that stuff. And that seems like a really good idea, right? So anyway, some bands go, and finally our band goes up, and we start playing, and the people there, were really excited to hear the band. Obviously, the singer from Anthrax was there, and we're playing the old Anthrax tunes and everything, so the crowd is really getting into it. There's a little mosh pit going inside this music store. And I remember the first thing that happened was a guy, he was probably up around 300 pounds or something. He gets launched out of the mosh pit, comes right towards me, and comes over the top of the stage. Now, when I say stage, we had a little platform, right, that was just off the ground like that high. So anybody could easily step onto like the stage area. So this guy gets launched out of the pit. He comes right towards me. He tramples my pedal board, runs into me, and then pushes me back into the amplifiers, into like the wall of amplifiers behind me. So I'm down, I'm down on the ground. Fortunately, the amps didn't fall over. And the guy gets up and he's like, "Oh, sorry, man," all this stuff. And he goes back into the crowd, but then he had like just butchered my pedal board. Like all of the cables were torn up and all this stuff. So, and this is in the middle of the show. So I had to scramble and like disconnect my pedal board and just get a cable going into the amp, just so I can get through the rest of the show. And I get it plugged in and we start going again. And of course they go right back to moshing, right? So now here's when things got really bad. So like I said earlier, the store had moved all of this equipment behind the counter, right? So from my perspective, I'm here on the stage, I'm looking out, you've got the audience, the pit, behind the audience is this big glass counter Behind that is all of the equipment, like guitars and everything, and behind that is like the wall of the inside of the store. So the pit really gets going. A big wave of people get pushed back against the glass counter and turn over the entire counter. So, they break all the glass in the counter and they turned the counter over onto all of the stuff that they had been trying to protect. And there were guitars back there, and it like snapped the necks on the guitars. And to make it even worse, one of the guys that got pushed into this counter, he was wearing glasses, and the glasses got like pushed into his head and cut his head pretty badly. So he gets up and he's got like blood coming down his face and everything, and there's like broken glass everywhere, and the people who own the place are freaking out, of course. So all of this, just total chaos happens, right? So what would the band do in that situation, right? Well, in a situation like that, you want to try and calm people down, you want to try and kind of like, okay, let's take everything down a notch. This dude in the back, he's bleeding down his face, he's injured, somebody should help him. Let's, get the counter back up. Let's just calm down and figure out what's going on. Well, the singer in the band, sometimes he would get angry at the audience, right? And I can't say that he had a reputation for this, because I don't know, how many people saw different shows and saw this happen, but being in the band, this was something that happened on a regular basis. And there had been some people in the audience earlier in the show who were kind of like egging him on, right? Making fun of him and that kind of stuff. And so he was already pretty pissed off. And then this thing happened, right? And so he just like picks up the mic and he starts yelling at the crowd and complaining. So at that point, everyone is angry. There's a guy who was injured, and like they'd broken all this stuff in the store. At this point, I don't remember. I mean, I know the owner came out and shut the show down. I don't remember if the singer like stormed off backstage, or if there were people threatening him or something like that where he wanted to leave. But one way or another, the show was done at that point. And there were still bands that were going to play after us, and of course they didn't get to play. So there's one element to this story which actually makes it even worse. The other guitar player in this band, there were two guitar players, I was one, this guy Mike was the other guitar player. He had booked the show. And I think, if I remember this correctly, and like I said, this is like 10 or 12 years ago, he was teaching guitar. He was giving guitar lessons at that music store, and that was his connection to the music store. Like, that's how it all got set up. And so in the aftermath of all of this, in the short term, they canceled the show and threw everyone out. Long term, I don't think they ever had another show there, certainly not any kind of thrash or metal show. And I don't think that guitar player ever got to teach there again because of all this. The other thing that comes to mind about this, like, I've never told this story publicly in an interview or on my channel or anything like this, but the other thing about this is that stories like this from this band were not that uncommon. And I was only in the band for about a year, I think, but just around LA, I would meet other musicians, and we'd be talking about, oh, hey, what are you working on? Oh, I, did this. And, oh, I played in Deathriders. I'm like, oh, you did? I played in Deathriders too, right? And I kept running into other musicians in LA who had also been in the same band, but at different time periods. It was just one of those bands that had a very high turnover rate, and a lot of people went in and out of that band. But everybody who was in the band had some crazy story like that to share. Okay, guys, so let me know what you think of all this down in the comments section below, and it would be really awesome, just in the off chance that somebody watching this video was actually there at that show. And if you remember any other details or something that I missed, I would love to hear from you. Okay, guys, I know this was kind of a different format video, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, as always, thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will talk to you very soon.